Evening, everyone. We'll call this meeting to order at 4 p.m. Adoption of the agenda.
That West Elgin Council hereby adopts the special meeting agenda of June 9th, 2025 as presented.
A mover, please. Councillor Denning, seconded. Councillor Statham, all in favour. That's carried. Disclosure of any pecuniary interest. Seeing none. Minutes of the previous special budget meeting.
That West Elgin Council hereby approve the special meeting budget minutes, June 3rd, 2025 as presented.
Mover, please. Deputy Mayor Tellier, seconded. Councillor Statham, all in favour. That's carried. 5. Staff reports and presentations. Magna Badura, the Manager of Corporate Services, Treasurer, 2025 draft budget. Thank you, Magna.
Good evening, Council. There is no PowerPoint presentation at this point. However, the changes that and revisions to the budgets have been made as per Council's direction. And I would like to go through them one by one, as there isn't that many of them. And then perhaps have further discussion on operating and capital budget. So let's just start with Port Glasgow Trailer Park. So there was no changes to the operating budget. However, capital, we've added $20,000 for washroom upgrades and another $50,000 for new washroom engineering for the new washroom, for the construction of the new washroom. So with two items under capital, additional $70,000 added to the capital budget. The transfers to reserves have been adjusted to $46,849.95. And I recalculated the estimated ending balance for the trailer park reserves as of December 31st, 2025. The amount is estimated to be at $987,477.76. Does anybody have any questions on that?
Just so that extra money's come from reserves.
That's correct.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Yes, Councillor Statham.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I just had a couple points. The sewage expense that I see there is $10,000. We've budgeted the same every year. I noticed that it's the last 2 years significantly under that amount, and I just wondered if you could comment on why we were allocating $10,000 when the last 2 years we spent under $5,000.
Yeah. So typically, as you have noticed, we budget $10,000, and this is basically in case the funds are needed, in case the extra work with the sewage system getting old. It's just we always budget for unexpected. That doesn't mean that the full $10,000 will be used. However, we just put it there just in case we have major repair and maintenance on the sewage system.
Thank you. That makes sense. I guess I just wondered if we decrease that amount slightly, it would decrease the burden on the general tax levy. If we haven't used it in previous years, I just thought maybe that was a way that we could shave $5,000 off of our off of the general.
But trailer park budget is not part of our operating budget. So
Okay.
It's just at the end of the year, it will just affect transfers to and from reserves.
Okay, fair enough. That's great. The other question I had was building repair. and maintenance. Again, the high amounts that are in there, $15,000, $15,000, $10,000, but again, we're not using that amount. It's just, again, the same justification that we're putting that aside and said, okay,
Yes.
that makes sense. And then the last point that I had was just the legal expenses. So this year we had the business study,
Mhm.
$10,000, $10,000. Last year we spent $1,900, and this year we have $20,000 allocated. Again, just looking for a quick comment on that.
Yeah, so $20,000 is the cost of business study and any kind of work related to this year's events, and that would basically justification of keeping the park or it. How do I say it? It's the study that will help council to make the decision to us for the future of the trailer park. So there might be, besides the business study, there might be some legal cost associated with it, some kind of legal advice, but we try to capture everything in that account.
That's great. Thank you very much, Magda.
Right, thank you. Can you take us to the next step, please?
Yes, so if there are no other questions, we're gonna go through quickly through the changes and revisions made to the operating budget. And we're gonna start with council. Account number 017,074.40, conferences, seminars, and meetings. That amount was reduced by $5,000 down to $10,000 as requested by council. Next item. Then under municipal roads, the grant for EV charging stations was kind of revised as well. As you can see, there has been two other accounts added. One of them is Green Economy Canada grant of $100,000. And just for clarification purposes, we've applied for Intact Municipal Climate Resiliency Grant. Previously, it was showing as a transfer from reserves. However, it's not a transfer from reserves. It's a grant that we have applied for. So just for the clarification purposes, I added that account so for future clarity. And then, of course, down on the expense side, I updated the project. This is the total project cost, which is $311,024. But if you subtract the revenue that we are receiving and another $60,000 transfer from reserves, the total operating cost to the municipality is $11,024. And with that being said, transfer from reserves was also adjusted, and that Intact grant of $200,000 was removed from there and moved under a separate account under revenue. Does anybody have any questions on that?
Questions, please. Seeing none this time.
Okay. And that's all for the revisions for in the operating budget. If you turn to your reserve schedule, in the original version, which hasn't changed, I added additional $100,000 transfer from reserves from tax rate stabilization reserves. So the total we're transferring this year from that reserves is $200,000. I have adjusted trailer park reserves down to $46,000. And then there was slight adjustment for OSIF funding, because as you know, Rodney Sewage is taking advantage of both Greenstream and OSIF funding. So transfers to and from reserves have been adjusted to reflect that as well. I have also in today's revised agenda package, I have provided council with 2021, 2022, and 2023 actuals for reserves. For your information only, from 21 to 2023, those are actual numbers. Those numbers will not change. 24, the year is not closed yet. Those are still estimates, and budget, 2025 budget is an estimated number. Does anybody have any questions on reserves?
Questions, please. Councillor Statham.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. You have 2023 listed as estimate. I just missed why that is. Why is 23's numbers listed as an estimate?
No, 24.
Yeah, no, I see that, but I'm looking at the top of the reserve schedule. And if you follow it across, we've got 2021, 2022, 2023 in the cell immediately next to the date, which describes at the very top, it says estimate.
Yes, so 2023, 12/31, that column, that's a balance as of December 31st of 2023, which is the beginning balance of 2024.
Okay, so 2023, oh, okay. So both of those two sections, 2024 and, okay,
That's correct.
okay, thank you. Thank you.
Further questions?
So council, I just want to, because there was a lot of questions at the last meeting about tax rate stabilization reserves. And as I mentioned at the last meeting that we, basically that account remains pretty much the same. As you can see from 2022, we have transferred in 2022, we transferred $367,000. This was our overall surplus at the end of the year, gave us a balance of $2.8 million. In 2023, we took out $194,000. This was the cost associated with the cyber attack. And at the same time, we transferred in a surplus of $25,000. In 2024, we already received the money from the insurance company. So as you can see, we're putting that $194,000 that we removed in 2023 back into tax rate stabilization reserves. And the $10,000 deductible will be part of 2024 actuals, operating budget actuals, and will be incorporated in that. So the final surplus for 2024, since our books are not closed yet and audit is not completed, that number you'll not see until financial statements are fully audited. Are there any other questions?
Further questions? Seeing none. Sure.
Yeah, my apologies, Mr. Mayor, and through you. Sorry, what is capital carried forward?
So in that account, we capture all the projects that have been approved by council, but were not completed.
Okay.
And there are different, so some of them are sidewalks, multi-surface courts, bridge, I believe. There's several projects that haven't been completed and are just sitting there awaiting the completion.
Okay, so the 300,000 that's coming out of that account, that's for projects that have been previously approved in previous years and are now being undertaken now.
That's correct.
I understand. Thank you.
Okay, we can move on.
Are there any other
There are no more
questions?
questions.
Good, okay. So if you turn into to your summary page, based on amendments we've made and the council approved, we're looking at 4.499 rate increase or 5.13% rate increase. And we're at the point where if council is comfortable with the budget as presented, we can bring the entire operating and capital budget for approval at June 12th council meeting.
Any questions on that? Yes, Councillor Denny.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through the chair. I just want to comment from my own perspective on this budget journey that we've all been on this year. This is my second one, and it's not been an easy effort. The staff has done a tremendous job, really hearing the concerns that we have put forward, that we have heard from our community, and I just want to say that the reduction of the rate increase from what we were initially proposing, it's significant. We're looking at, I think, what's that, 4% decrease. So I just want to thank the staff for all the work that you've done to help us get that down and make that increase a little more reasonable for the community, and very, very proud to be a part of it. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I'm sure everybody feels in that same mode of thought. Right, so where do we go from here? Is that the end of your budget today?
Yes.
So we go down to the 5.2?
Yep.
5.2. Al Green,
Are we,
Greenall, CAO. Could you take us through this next one, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before we move on, I guess, so council will, it seems that council is in agreement to where the budget stands today. So perhaps so Magda we can make sure we're drafting the proper documentation. Did council want to approve in principle, or did council wishes to move it towards June 20th for approval? Well,
The 12th.
12th.
Yes.
Just gonna extend this budget process.
Sorry, I think I agree with everything that's here. I agree very much with Councillor Denning. You've done a great job of getting that number down to a palatable figure. I think the community appreciates it. I appreciate it. I'm good with everything that's here. I'm looking forward to the presentations that you have, Robin. But I'm okay with everything. I think it's a general consensus, I would believe. And then if we can vote on it at the meeting of the 12th and accept the budget at that point, I'm perfect with that. That's great with me.
so today, do
Okay.
we have a motion as accepting as information only? Sorry, I should have the microphone on.
Yeah, I think that's where we're
Okay.
at. Yep.
We could do that.
Yep, if I could have that motion.
Okay, a mover please for that. Councillor Statham, seconded. Deputy Mayor Tellier. All in favour?
Okay. And just because I didn't have my microphone on before, that is a motion to accept the budget as information only.
That's carried. Okay, so. Al Greenall, CAO, if you would please.
It did not, no.
That's okay, just go to the next page. So council Thank you. I will turn on the microphone. Council, at your last meeting, you had asked for some information to be brought forward for council and then probably also for our community members to understand sort of the impact of sort of pay equity in our organization review, sort of answering some of the questions as to why. I think those processes were looked at and implemented, and then just very high level why that would have an impact on the budget this year. So for pay equity, council may be aware, so in 1987, the Ontario government implemented a Pay Equity Act. And this was the Pay Equity Act 1990. This is a description right from the Q&A guide to Ontario Pay Equity. So if anyone who is accessing the slide at home can actually link in directly to it and read more information than what I've highlighted here. But this act was put into place to make sure that employers' compensation practices were providing pay equity for all employees, particularly employees in job female classes. And this was to start to redress some of the systemic gender discrimination for compensation for work performed by employees in female job classes. And on to the next slide. This act sets out the minimum obligations and such obligations that employers are required to take specific steps to ensure that pay equity exists within their workplace. Employers are responsible for implementing pay equity, regardless or not whether they believe they have fair compensation or non-discriminatory practice, or whether or not a complaint is made. So all employers must show how they have come to the pay scales, and particularly in public service, how we've come to the pay rates and pay scales for all of our jobs. Jobs are assessed and based on the responsibilities of that work. It's not necessarily the volume of work someone does, but the responsibility levels that their job requires of them. So in the next slide, West Elgin consulted ML Consulting to complete a compensation review in 2024. The consultant was retained to conduct a review of our current compensation program. That was as of January 2023. So is looking at all of our wage rates across the organization. And through this review, we were assessing whether it was competitive to the market. And this competitiveness also helps the organization understand whether they can have a fair wage compensation when you're looking at attraction and retention purposes, and to develop and revise a salary grid for implementation in 2024. The review of internal equity and pay practices ensure compliances with the Pay Equity Act. And so for council to be aware, there's both internal and external equity. So external is looking at those jobs that are comparable to the work that someone is doing within the workplace. One is for sort of market purposes. Are you able to attract people? But also, is the pay wage comparable to that of similar jobs within an identifiable group? Internal equity is making sure that of responsibility levels within the organization, that there's sort of fair distribution of that wage. So as the CAO, the volume of responsibility is comparable down to an entry-level position, right? And there's, believe it or not, complicated arithmetic or equations that go to identify what the regression factor is, but they're trying to show that as responsibilities decrease, it fairly decreases down according to those responsibilities. And the output of this review was to enable future growth of the organization, have job design, and a foundation to align fair and competitive pay and performance. And this information came directly from a compensation update that was provided to council, I believe, in early 2024 or late 2023. I think it was early 2024. On the next slide, it describes what the pay equity process that you underwent, what the 4 principles that were there guiding this process. One, we were looking for fairness, that there was internal equity. That's evaluating jobs and making sure that the wages reflect the responsibility levels of every work class that we have. That there was compliance, that is compliance to the Act, making sure that we have assessed all roles fairly and adequately, and that there was competitiveness, and that, you know, the jobs that were for West Elgin We're comparable and competitive to our comparators. And just to understand, comparators are looking at small municipalities of similar sizes. So those would be Dutton Dunwich, Blenheim Blandford, Bayham, Lincoln Bulford, North Middlesex, Southwold, Southwest Middlesex, and Plimpton, Wyoming. So it wasn't in comparison to Toronto or London or a large municipality. It was relative to a size, and that there's sustainability and renewable. This is also understanding the current budget and how we start to implement sort of those changes and the impacts that may have on the current budget. And then putting in best practice compensation tools, system renewals, and processes in order to support a compensation program. And what that also means is in council, you do have that within your current process, is making sure that things like CPI or wage rate adjustments are happening in small incremental measures annually, as opposed to getting to a position where you haven't looked at your compensation in 10, 15 years and you are hit with a large adjustment. So on the next slide, it says compensation market assessment. And so when they did the assessment through this pay equity process or compensation process, it was identified that West Elgin was far below the 50th percentile. And so from a competitive standpoint, wages were not competing to that of our neighbors. From a pay equity standpoint, the jobs were not being evaluated fairly on an external assessment level. And so they have found reasons for this is that your historical economic adjustments had not been kept up. So whether there were not those small incremental adjustments year over year, or those adjustments were not matching what was happening within the economy. And certainly over that time, we have seen large fluctuations with CPI. Many of the comparators who we were using had undergone wage salary review. So they had updated their plans and they had updated sort of their external assessments within the last 5 years. And a special note, West Elgin had not done a pay record review since 2015. So there was a 10-year gap within that assessment period. And some of our comparators had revisited their compensation policies and they had adjusted their comparator pools. We, in the last 5 years, certainly have come to a situation where everybody's out in the market competing for the same small pool of people. And so a lot of our comparators were making adjustments to make sure that their compensation or benefits packages were attractive to attract the right people to the roles that they needed. And so pay equity was completed and presented to this council, I believe, on June 27th, 2024. And so then the adjustments occurred in 2024, but whether because the budget was completed before this came in. And so you may have seen, we may have paid out on those adjustments, but it may not have been identified completely within the 2024 budget by that time. So layered on top of pay equity, this organization also completed an organization review. They consulted Linton Consulting Services. That review was to look at the balance of responsibility to create sustainable roles. It was also tasked with improving internal and external customer service and to make sure that we were setting up an organization structure for some succession planning that better supports attraction and retention of staff. On the next slide, this was the organization chart. Prior to going into the organization review, you had a shared CAO treasurer role. You had 4 identified services, and then at the side, there were also several other functions that were reporting to or were handled directly by the CAO treasurer. And so this review was creating some challenges for the organization and the balance of responsibility. And so Kelly Linton had come in and the Linton Consulting, and on the next slide proposed a change, a structural change where the responsibilities were distributed over 5 distinct service groups. They split the CAO role and created a manager of corporate services. They balanced some of the positions which currently were sitting in the manager of operations and community services. And that role became focused on infrastructure and development. And they took all the external operations and moved it over to the manager of community services, and that role became shared with the clerk. They adjusted staffing underneath all of those service groups in order to support the work that needed to be done by the service managers. And they had a recommendation of 2 roles for council to consider to support this structure, which one was creating the manager of corporate services treasurer. And the second one was creating specialist communication and community engagement. So in 2024, on the next slide, 2024 took into account some of the pay equity adjustments. It wasn't necessarily reflected going into the budget, but we had to account for it as we were then adjusting the wages of our staff. However, at the same time in 2024, there was a high attrition rate, or we're still feeling the effects of high attrition rate. So there's a vacancy within the administrative assistant records management role. There was a vacancy within the treasurer's role. There was attrition, and this delayed the implementation of your organization review structure. So coming into 2020, and the next slide sort of shows you when you took that organization review and you identified all of those gaps and positions not being able to move, this is what your organizational chart looks like. You still have a CAO treasurer, now having some defined functions within the role and having some balance. However, there's a manager of community service that does not have any positions under them to help support implementation of those new roles and responsibilities. And the admin assistant that was remaining now was supporting 2 service departments. So moving into 2025, the 2025 budget tried to address some of those gaps and tried to move forward with the implementation of the plan. There was, and this is where you see the jump or a significant jump within the administrative wage and benefits line. So there was the split of the CAO treasurer role, and probably the largest impact upon your budget. And that was accounted for by council's approved wages for those lines. This one would also take on the full impact of pay equity, because pay equity was not implemented until July. And so now this budget is going to take on the full impact of the changes to everyone's wages across the organization. This budget has the reinstatement of the admin assistant role for records management, so that the service department, which is now the manager of community services / clerk, has some staffing in order to support the jobs and requirements, responsibilities within that department. And this also has a consideration for that community service and community engagement, communications and community service engagement position. This was a recommendation by council for this to be brought forward at the budget time for your consideration. This role then will also help the community services / clerk department, because this role will be focusing on the recreation and communications outreach, whereas the admin assistant for records management does more of the internal functions and dealing with sort of our records management and supporting sort of the licensing and the clerk roles and positions. And so bringing forward your organization review, also addressing the pay equity that was happening at the same time, and the implementation of the full implementation of that pay equity plan is why there was some adjustments. And you see those significant adjustments to wages from 24 to 2025. And so with that, the next chart does show the proposal for 2025 is the full implementation of this organization review as approved by council within, I believe it was early 2024, January, February of 2024 is approved by council. I'd also like council to be aware, and the last slide for this is annually there are some impacts on our budget. There are annual step increases. So for every job, we're not just saying this is your salary and that shall be your salary forever and ever. We have a 6-step program which works people into that salary. That's also full job to get to full job rate. The premise of that is it takes a while for people to work up to their full responsibilities, and then therefore the job wage is accounting for that 5-6 year period in order to reach full job responsibility or full job rate. And Magda, I believe that's usually about a 4% gap between each step annual.
Yes, I did prepare a summary for wages and how much it is costing us this year, split by 2% inflationary increases. I'm gonna send.
How about I
this-
finish this and then
Of course,
we'll
yeah.
move to that, okay? And then, of course, then there's the annual wage adjustment. And this annual wage adjustment is part of that efforts to account for making sure that our jobs remain marketable, that we are retaining sort of in that pay equity structure so that when we are required to do another review in about 10 years' time, the difference between our wages today and the wages tomorrow, we are hoping to maintain into that 50th percentile range. And if we slip below, we're hoping not to be as far below as we currently were. So council, I hope that answers some of the questions to be brought forward so the community can understand where we got to and why we are seeing a large jump in the 2020-25 budget, and the processes that are required. So pay equity is definitely a process that is legislatively required. An organizational review is the process that council chose to adopt so that you could address some of the challenges you were experiencing within your organization. Hopefully to making sure that you have a good solid foundation so that we can improve our communication, so that we have capacity built within the organization to do the work and the direction of this council, and that we can not only meet today's needs of our community, but the future needs going forward. So if there are any questions, Mr. Mayor, I'm happy to
Questions,
answer.
please.
Mr. Mayor, I had a comment, just a comment. Thank you, Robin, for presenting that. I think that makes a lot of sense, and I think that goes a long way in explaining why we saw that jump in the administrative cost for wages, and I really appreciate you taking the time to do that. I would just wanted to point out in both of those half presentations, one about the pay equity and one about the organizational review, you mentioned a phrase both times that I think is relevant, and that's attraction and retention. We are not going to succeed as an organization if we're not attracting new employees and retaining the existing employees. The cost of training and getting new employees on board is one of the largest costs that any organization will ever face. And I think that that is something that we absolutely need to address. And I think this does a great job of doing that. And I think we've made the right decisions, and I think I stand behind them 100%. So thank you very much for
Yeah,
doing that.
thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, we fell behind and now we'll keep up with it and not get in that situation again. Further questions, anyone?
Great.
Hmm?
Why that Magda just.
There's only
Oh.
one slide.
Yep.
I just.
Magna then, fuel.
Through the chair, I just want to put it kind of as a summary slide, because we were talking in my previous presentation back in May, I indicated to council that total wages and benefits increase this year is at $391,000. So I kind of split it into, so 237,958 pertains to splitting CAO treasurer position and having one sole position plus 6 months of administrative assistant for records management and 6 months for recreation coordinator. So that number represents really 3 positions. And then a 2% inflationary increase that every employee, including council, received represents almost $41,000. 4% step increases represents $49,000. And then payroll benefits such as CPP, EI, EHT, and WSIB represents $26,770. Health benefits, $12,500, and OMERS pension that municipality has to contribute to on behalf of their employees is almost $24,000.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Mayor Tellier, please.
Thank you, through the chair. Thank you for that chart. And can we have it emailed to us too? Okay, that's great. I appreciate all the time and putting Robin into your report to us, even though we looked at it last year to encapsulate it again for us and also for this, Magda. I also get a lot of, it's kind of connected, but not really, but I'll connect it, I guess. Why don't we hire from our area? Why don't we hire from our area? get that a lot. And since we're talking about retention and training, we have population that, you know, so much of it's retired and so much of it is not in this field, and that might be why maybe we're not getting the resumes that we need. So, and also, just for residents that'll be watching this later, we're legislated, you cannot hire someone based on where they live. It's based on their background, if they're qualified for the job and any other things. So need to think about that too, when we're hiring people, but, which we do. So this has been great and a great refresher and a great lesson for people that have had lots of questions. So I appreciate all the time that went into it for staff.
Thank you. Councillor Denny, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through the chair. So thank you, Robin. Thank you, Magda. I think it's also important as the community's looking at these numbers and seeing the significant increase, that one of the reasons why we went into this organizational review and compensation assessment was that we had a shared role for many years in our CAO and our treasurer. And it had been pointed out to us through professionals as well as other well-researched community members that those two roles blended together could be perceived as a bit of a conflict in objectives, as treasurer's responsibility is to maintain a budget and to build up the reserves and to save money, whereas the CAO's responsibility is strategic initiatives and finding appropriate places to invest those money. Magda did both of those roles for 5 years, 5 years, and I think did a fantastic job. But like many other organizations, we continue to refine ourselves. We continue to grow and to listen to the consultants, and hence the reason why we split those roles. And we have two professionals sitting around the horseshoe with us as opposed to just the one that we had. So for the community members who are asking about that significant salary spread, I thought that that might be just worth taking a moment to explain to the community that we were listening to our professionals and our consultants, and hence the reason why we have those two roles no longer shared. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for that. Anything further? No? Well, everything that's been said tonight is echoed for me. Everyone's done a marvellous job. I have no complaints at all. Thank you. So from there we go.
Magda was going to discuss the investment interest.
Oh, yes. Magda, the investment interest presentation, if you got it, please.
Sorry, there's no presentation. We're just.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So there's no presentation.
Okay.
It's just, I think perhaps clarification how the interest is allocated. So that $250,000 that we budget this year in interest, that's a net amount. Last year, we earned average interest of 3.78%, I believe. And that interest, as per our reserve policy, was allocated to discretionary and obligatory reserves. So whatever, once all the interest is allocated to those reserves, the rest of the interest stays in that account. We have been very fortunate last year and the year before. We have been earning really good interest. So usually we finish the year with more money of what we have anticipated. I don't know. I don't have any predictions where we're going to end up at the end of this year, but I'm still hoping that our net interest that we can use towards our operating budget will not be less than $250,000 of what we're budgeting. Did I answer your questions, Councillor Statham? Because I think most of them came from you last time.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
through you. Yes, Magda, thank you. And I think just a little bit of the confusion was just I couldn't identify where the interest was going.
Okay.
I could see the $250,000, but that didn't encapsulate all of the interest that we were earning. That was a small portion of it. And like you said, we made 3.78%, but a significant amount of that was going into discretionary and obligatory reserves. I'd like to know which reserves those are, just so that it
Yep.
makes sense where those funds were transferred in. You don't have to tell me right now. You shoot me an email and I can take a look at it. But that explains why that number, that 250,000, was lower than what I would have hoped for on interest for a 13 or 12 million or $15 million reserve total. So that does make sense, and I appreciate you explaining that. I think I'm okay. Maybe if you get a moment, if you could send me the reserve funds that it goes
Yeah,
into.
and I can certainly provide you an example of how the interest is allocated.
Sure.
Since now I provided council with previous year's reserve schedules. So now, with providing you 2024 and 2025, that allocation to reserve is not really showing in that reserve schedule. But so just like I mentioned, we're only allocating interest to obligatory and restricted reserves. And those are located near the bottom of that reserve schedule. Those are West Lawn Sewage, Water, Rodney Sewage, Provincial Gas Tax, Federal Gas Tax, OSIP funding. So as you can see, there is, besides of, so for instance, for OSIP funding, that $440,000 is the entire transfer of OSIP funding received in 2022 plus allocated interest, whatever that interest was. And then that $267,000 is transferred out of reserves, and we use that funding back then for resurfacing Marsh Line. So in terms of, how much interest at that time we have transferred, I can provide you that information as well. I don't have it with me, but, clearly in the previous year, you can see that transfer to reserves with annual allocation of the funding. Or surplus in certain departments. So for instance, for Rodney Sewer, there would have been a surplus at the end of the year plus the interest allocation.
It makes perfect sense. And again, I apologize if it sounded like I was drilling you on this. I think it's just I'm not an accountant, and I know a lot of people listening at home aren't either. And when you see a line item that says, interest, the assumption is made that is all of the interest that we're earning. And you've done a great job of explaining where the remainder of the interest on our reserve funds are put into those accounts. So thank you for doing that. I appreciate you taking
I
that.
understand.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, further questions of anyone? I think we can go. You got a question? No? Seeing none.
Okay, number 6.
Confirmatory bylaw.
That bylaw 2025-34, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the special meeting of council held on June 9th, 2025, be read a first, second, third, and final time.
Move it, please. Councillor Statham, seconded. Deputy Mayor Tellier, all in favour? That's carried, thank you. And that brings us already to adjournment.
That the Council of the Municipality of West Elgin hereby adjourn the special meeting of council at 4:49 p.m. to meet again at 4:00 p.m. on Tuesday, June 10th, 2025, or at the call of the chair.
Move it, please.
I was just gonna say we should,
Oh, sorry.
yep, sorry, I had that in there. I'm gonna reread that because we don't need to meet tomorrow.
Correct.
council
correct.
is-
And that's count. Yep,
Can I speak for council?
sorry.
Just adjust what you're gonna do.
That the Council of the Municipality of West Elgin hereby adjourn the special meeting of council at 4:49 p.m. to meet again at 4:00 p.m. on Thursday, June 12th, 2025, or at the call of the chair.
Move it, please. Deputy Mayor Tellier, seconded. Councillor Statham, all in favour? That's carried. Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. Have a good night.